Hi everyone, this is A Gamer's Wife and I have the pleasure of being with Kasia from Creative Pet Keeping. Tell people who aren't familiar with your channel what your channel's all about.
So my channel is about my adventures in fish keeping in a little apartment where I breed cichlids, learn about different cichlid species, as well as take care of my bettas and more common fish that we see in the hobby, and I breed bettas too.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you, Kasia, is because you've bred and kept so many betta fish. I have an elderly, what I consider an elderly betta fish, who is almost 3 years old. I wanted to ask you, most of us don't know how old our betta fish are. What would you consider as some of the signs of someone might have an older betta fish, I guess?
Well, let us walk over to Sunny so I can talk about him as he rests on his little, he's happy in there. So older betta fish, the first thing you'll start to see is they're going to start slowing down, and you're going to see their fins are just not going to be as beautifully clean and nice as they used to be. Sometimes they'll have these little dots in them. That means some of the rays broke over time because they've been, kind of squishing themselves in between some driftwood. Bettas like to see where they can fit because they're ambush predators. So you'll see a little breakage happening. Sometimes tumors will develop with some older bettas depending on what their genetics are. But another thing you'll start to see is they're going to start to beg for food and then start resting a lot more than they used to, and their color is just not going to be as strongly vivid as it used to be as they start to get a little older. Like this guy, he's starting to have a little tumor developing on his chin, but luckily it's been growing very slowly for a long time, so I'm very happy and hopeful. But one thing that will speed up the aging process of your betta fish, one that will be temperature. So warmer temperature, faster metabolism. So if you keep your betta, for example, at 84, which you can, breeders, when they breed, they'll really crank up the temperature just for a short period of time when they're breeding. But let's say hypothetically, that's what you kept your fish at all the time. Because their metabolism is sped up, they're going to start aging faster. Another thing that's going to affect their aging process is power feeding. Some breeders, a lot of breeders want their fish to grow up quite quickly because it's expensive to keep fish long term because you have to feed them and it takes a lot of employees to do water changes. You can pay for water sometimes in certain circumstances. So you can grow a betta fish to full size in about 2 to 3 months, surprisingly, big full size. If you feed them a lot of foods, especially what are they called, live foods, or some people will feed beef heart. And I've power grown one spawn in the past. The downside is all of them ended up getting fatty liver disease because of it. And I think that might be why for a lot of people your betta might not live as long. I noticed that letting them grow up a little slower, feeding them still pretty well, but trying to feed them better things, healthier, mixes of things to get a variety of foods, and exercise actually helps them live a longer life. And lastly, since we have Raspberry down here, since I spawned him, I noticed that bettas that go through the entire spawning process, because it is so intensive on their body, because they spawn for hours, it's stressful because you got the female and you gotta show up, and sometimes they fight a bit. Afterwards, I noticed all my bettas don't live very long, which is one of the reasons why I was hesitant to breed Sunny, because I was like, I really want Sunny to live as long as possible. So all of the things that I've been talking about, keep in mind that these are theories and observations that I have formed over observing my fish. There's not actual tested factual evidence, besides the fact that there was one study done where they did compare bettas where they would chase them around with a net to bettas that were stationary and didn't really move a lot. The ones that got more exercise lived longer, but I have to find that study. You can keep your betta in the same tank that it's living as it gets older, but keep in mind that if you have a long fin betta and maybe you have some flow in your tank and some community fish that are fast eaters, it might be nice to either get a little breeding container that you teach him to swim in so you can separately feed him or rest if fish are bothering him too much, or consider a retirement tank. That's one of the situations where I do recommend the smaller tanks you see at pet stores, because that could be great for an older Betta that just doesn't have the energy to like swim around or can't even like compete for food. So with Sunny, and I forgot to say, when I feed him, I will use a dropper or I will use tongs and I'll feed him directly. So when he sees the little dropper, he'll swim right up to it and he'll eat right from it because the endlers will snatch all his food. Other things, you know, you could do Betta leaves to help him, give him something to rest on the Betta log where Sunny hangs out. So there's a lot of things. I think you have to just pay attention to your individual fish, which is why, while I like the generic recommendations for fish species, I still think it's very important to look at your individual fish and just case by case and just adapt to what your fish like really needs and would benefit from.
Thank you so much to Kasia for sharing all this amazing information. I know it's gonna really help me better my care for Soundwave in his later years, and I hope it helps you too with your old Betta fish as well.
Take time to enjoy your aquarium.
And I'll see you in the next video. Bye!
We did it, and I bumped myself.